Hello, everyone. And my name is Jimmy Lin, and I am a Senior Product Manager at SlashNext. I thank you for joining today's webinar on SlashNext period threat detection for fully automated IR with Splunk. So over the next 20 minutes, I'll cover who we are and the current phishing threat landscape. I'll spend some time on our threat detection technology, Seer, and explain how it is different than the threat intelligence that you may be using today for incident response. And finally, I'll cover our native apps for Splunk Phantom and Splunk Enterprise Security. Our integration with Splunk will enable your organization to fully automate abuse inbox management and to proactively hunt for zero-hour threats. And if you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the Q&A section, and I'll get through them at the end of the webinar. A quick introduction to who we are. SlashNext was founded in 2014 by our CEO, Atif. He was the lead architect that developed the sandbox technology at FireEye to detect file-based threats. And while he was there, he had the foresight that phishing was going to be a much larger problem than malware-based attacks because it's a much more difficult problem to solve. And his early realization of this shift from malware to phishing was the genesis for starting this company with the mission to protect the world's internet users from phishing attacks. So over the last 6 years, Atif and our data scientists and threat researchers have built an anti-phishing platform that uses virtual browsers and machine learning that detects the newest phishing campaigns hours, sometimes days ahead of our competitors. So the phishing threat landscape, when Atif founded the company in 2014, malware-based attacks was more pervasive. Fast forward to today, phishing, as you all know, is the #1 threat action used to breach organizations. But I'm surprised by how pervasive phishing really is every time I look at this graph. This data shows the number of unsafe websites Google Safe Browsing discovers every day, and a breakdown between the number of phishing sites versus malware sites. The latest data published is for May 17th, where Google discovered almost 2 million phishing websites versus only about 21,000 websites hosting malware. So one interesting thing I noticed is that, on March 15th, there was a sudden increase in phishing websites, almost a vertical line in this graph. That was the date that some states in the US went into lockdown, requiring employees to work from home. Our researchers found a 3,000% increase in COVID-19 themed phishing websites in the second half of March compared to the first half. Cyber criminals, as you would expect, wasted no time to take advantage of this pandemic. So sorry I digressed there, but hopefully this information was interesting. The second trend that we are seeing with phishing is that it has moved beyond credential stealing, but most people still associate phishing only with websites that attempt to steal your usernames and passwords. The phishing landscape has changed, and credential stealing phishing is just one of many categories of phishing. You have social engineering scam websites that attempts to steal your users' credit card numbers by offering fake deals or prizes. You have scareware phishing websites using fear to trick your users into clicking on a link, downloading ransomware instead of free AV software that was advertised. So when you are evaluating a threat intelligence solution, you need to make sure that it has strong zero-hour phishing detection, because a new phishing website is launched every 20 seconds, and that the solution can detect phishing threats beyond credential stealing. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, phishing is pervasive. It has expanded beyond credential stealing, and unfortunately, it's moving so fast that it's impossible for secure email gateway to block 100% of the phishing attacks. And email, as you know, is the #1 vector used by cyber criminals to deliver those attacks. So as a result, it's very common now for organizations to have a detect and response strategy as part of their overall cyber defense strategy to prevent user compromise and data breach from phishing attacks. Now, when it comes to detecting phishing threats, automation is key. The fact that you are here today means you are likely using automation to quickly detect and respond to phishing emails missed by your secure email gateways. For those that are newer to automation or orchestration, there are two primary components. You have SOAR platforms and threat intelligence feeds. SOAR platforms like Splunk Phantom automate tasks like extracting the URL from the emails, submitting them to the intelligence feeds for analysis, deleting malicious emails from user inboxes, right? All the chores that some folks do manually. The intelligence feed is responsible for analyzing the URL that was extracted from the email and returning a verdict. It has one job, but a very critical one, because the verdict it returns dictates the action or the response that is taken next. So automation really is only as good as the threat intelligence feeding your playbooks. So let's talk about what that means in more detail. We surveyed 300 cybersecurity professionals that uses at least one threat intelligence feed in their SOAR platforms. They told us their top two concerns with the current threat intelligence feeds are the need for better detection of zero-hour phishing websites. In other words, they are experiencing too many false negatives. The second one is about the verdict that is returned. They want a definitive, accurate verdict that is actionable. So let's take a look at what SlashNext offers. Our solution provides a detection rate of 99.95%. We find that competing solutions listed on VirusTotal takes hours to catch up. For phishing websites that are hosted on legitimate hosting infrastructures, such as SharePoint, which is not uncommon anymore, we find that the same competing solutions takes up to 2 days to catch up. So if your threat intelligence provider isn't able to detect zero-hour phishing URLs as malicious, it means you're unlikely to respond by searching for emails containing the URLs, right? Because there's no reason to do so. As a result, those emails remain in your user inboxes, which leaves them vulnerable to being compromised, which can lead to data breach. Our capability to detect zero-hour phishing threats greatly reduces the risk of breach for your organization. Now let's talk about accuracy. We don't sacrifice accuracy for high detection rate. Our solution has a FP rate of only 1 in every 7 million URLs we inspect. Our competitors generate as many as 1 FP for every 100 URL inspections. They add to the problem of false alert fatigue that many of you are probably familiar with. But FPs can cause a much larger problem, right? It can lead you to respond by deleting emails that are business critical that the intelligence feed told you that it was actually malicious when it's not. So that is why many organizations are very hesitant to fully automate their IR process, right? They want a human to step in and validate the verdict before taking the next step. So with our solution, the risk of false positives is absolutely minimal, allowing you to achieve full automation. And then lastly, our solution provides a definitive verdict that's easy to interpret and actionable. After we analyze a URL, we provide you with a binary verdict. It's either malicious or benign. Other solutions that we see on the market provide you with a threat score, 7 on a scale of 1 to 10, or a reputation index like medium risk, suspicious. According to our survey, analysts spend between 6 to 10 minutes on additional research due to the confusing or inconclusive verdicts that they receive from their current phishing threat intelligence. So to summarize, automation is only as good as the threat intelligence feeding your playbooks. The verdict that we provide is accurate and actionable to allow you to achieve full automation. So now that we understand the benefits, the values that we provide, I want to take a couple of minutes to explain how we achieve them. Over the last 6 years, our data scientists have developed our patented technology called Seer. Seer is a cloud-based threat detection engine and is unique. It looks at phishing websites as a threat researcher would. So for every URL that is submitted, Seer will spin up the website in our virtual browsers. We let the website fully render and then extract the image, text, and other metadata for analysis. For example, we apply our computer vision ML to the images to detect visual deviations of fake login pages that impersonate the likes of Office 365, Apple, PayPal, etc. It also applies active site behavior analysis by entering data into the username and password field and monitor how and where the data is being exfiltrated to. Are the credentials being sent to a host that's located in the Ukraine, for example? So these are just two examples of the many advanced techniques that are applied as part of our dynamic runtime analysis to detect zero-hour phishing threats. And I can go on and on, but we have a very limited time. Now, in terms of Playbook Commands, we support many. One command I want to call out is the host URL scan call. It's really powerful. What we do is we take the host portion of the URL that the Playbook extracted and submitted to us, right? And we go and find all the malicious URLs that are associated with that host. And this basically provides you with insight into malicious URLs that you didn't know before, malicious URLs that users may not have even reported. And this new information can then be proactively used to block attacks before they happen. In terms of the response that we provide as a result of the API call, the forensic information is very comprehensive. It tells you if the URL is a redirector and what the final attack website is, if the threat status is still active, and also a screenshot of the actual phishing lure page as an evidence for our verdict. A few more scanning capabilities I want to call out. Some phishing websites, you may have seen this, apply a number of defensive and offensive techniques to prevent itself from being scanned. And they use things like CAPTCHA, where you have to prove that you are a human, right, by picking out the square boxes that contain the cars, inspection blocking based on IP, and also putting the text in an image file. So our solution has the ability to overcome all these evasive techniques. Most solutions on the market can overcome URL redirection. That's very common, but very few can overcome the more sophisticated techniques like CAPTCHA or inspection blocking based on IP. If your intelligence feed provider cannot overcome these techniques, what that basically means is that they cannot scan those websites, and therefore it's impossible for them to detect new phishing websites in a timely manner. And as I mentioned earlier, our detection engine looks at websites as a threat researcher would, using dynamic runtime analysis. Most of the solutions on the market rely heavily on domain tokenization, heuristics, and reputation, right? If a website is newly registered or newly discovered, they mark it as suspicious or even malicious. The problem that causes is that it can generate a lot of false positives because legitimate organizations do create new domains for advertisement marketing purposes, for example. And because they rely heavily on reputation, then it's impossible for them to detect zero-hour phishing threats that are hosted on legitimate infrastructures like SharePoint, until many hours later. Now, some vendors will claim that they sandbox URL, which is very misleading. What they don't tell you is that their sandbox technology is only applied to binary files, right? If the URL leads to an executable, for example. But a credential stealing phishing doesn't contain any binary files, only text and images. So in that instance, they fall back to domain or URL analysis to determine if a website is phishing or not. So now that we understand the value we provide and how we provide them, let's talk about how we integrate our solution into your existing Splunk Phantom SOAR playbooks. So this is a high-level data flow diagram, and it should be familiar to many of you. In step number 1, we ingest the suspicious email reported by your end users. In step number 2, our playbook extracts the URLs and submit it to Seer for dynamic analysis. So this is where we will open up the URL in the virtual browsers, let the page fully render. It then extract the information, apply the scanning techniques. In step number 3, we return the binary verdict for the URL, benign or malicious, and its forensic information. And as I mentioned earlier, we could also scan the host, right, and return essentially the same information for other URLs that we uncovered on that host. And in step number 4 is the response, right? We can add the malicious URL to your security email gateways, proxies, or tip platforms to prevent threats from coming in. And we can also remove emails containing the URL from user inboxes. Right? So what I want to show now is a quick demo of the verdict and the forensic information that is returned in Splunk Phantom. Okay. The first thing I want to point out is that our app can be downloaded from the App Store within Phantom. All you need is a key to start using our solution. And you can request for a key on our website, and I'll provide further instructions at the end of this webinar. And once you have the key, it takes no longer than 5 minutes to get yourself up and running. These are the 11 actions that is supported and can be incorporated into your playbook. They can also be run on demand as well. So if your CISO sends you an ad hoc request, you can use one of these actions on demand to enrich a URL, domain, or IP address. So this is a sample playbook, and it's very simple. It simply extracts the URL from the emails and submit it to Seer for analysis. For a POC, you can use this playbook to validate the value that we provide, right, without having to be concerned about messing up your existing playbooks. And in production, you simply add our action into your existing playbooks. It's really just that simple. Okay. Now, prior to this webinar, I submitted an email with a suspicious URL. Now, our playbook extracted the URL and performed a URL and host lookup. So I want to go through the forensic information with you now. So in the scan report, what you will see is the URL that is extracted from the email and the binary verdict that we return. In this case, the URL is malicious. We'll also tell you if the website is currently active or not, and when we first seen and last seen the website. It also provides the threat name, in this case, a fake login page, and also the threat type. Now, in addition to this forensic information, you also get a screen grab of the phishing website as well. This is the phishing website the user would have seen if they went to that URL. Right? And this information can be downloaded in HTML or text format. Now, in the event that the URL that we extracted is a redirector, let's say it's a SendGrid link, for example, we follow the URL to the landing page. Right? So the information that's surfaced in here will contain information for the redirector as well as the final attack page. The second thing I want to show you really quick is the host report from that host command. The information is identical. It has the threat status, first seen, last seen, and also a screen grab of the URL. The difference is, again, we take the host portion of a URL, right? And then we go and essentially look for malicious URLs that are on that host. So if we uncover 3, 4, 5 malicious URLs, we'll return the verdict and also all the forensic information for those URLs. again, giving you visibility into malicious URLs that you didn't have before. So that concludes the subject of fully automating IR with SlashNext and Splunk Phantom. The next topic I'll cover is our integration with Splunk Enterprise Security for threat hunting. I want to start by bringing your attention back to our threat detection engine, Seer. In addition to analyzing URLs submitted by our customers, Seer ingests about 1 billion URLs and internet transactions daily from many sources. The sources include passive DNS information, our phishing traps, hardware sensors that are installed inside our customers' environments. And we analyze the traffic using the same dynamic runtime analysis, allowing us to uncover the latest phishing URLs and their command and control server information. This information, real-time phishing intelligence, is then consumed by our app for Splunk Enterprise Security. Now, taking a step back, a common approach, I'm probably preaching to the choir, to threat hunting is to leverage a SIEM solution that centrally collects log data from multiple sources, such as your firewall, your endpoint, your DNS. And then you layer that information with threat intelligence to help you hunt for threats that are lurking inside your environment. And your success is highly dependent on timely and accurate threat intel. And that is exactly what we provide. The real-time information allows you to identify user accounts that have been compromised. It'll help you identify rogue browser extensions, as well as compromised endpoints that are communicating with command and control servers. Our app, just like the app for Phantom, can be downloaded directly from Splunk or Splunk base. And once it's installed, you can easily cross-reference the destination host or IP in your network logs against our intelligence to quickly identify endpoints that are communicating with command and control servers. Now, in addition to the real-time phishing threat intelligence, we have also integrated the on-demand analysis and enrichment capabilities directly into our Splunk app. So from this app, you can make a call to our cloud detection engine to initiate a dynamic runtime analysis on a suspicious IOC. It could be an IP address, host, or domain, and we'll enrich that information and return the verdict. In addition to integration with Splunk Phantom and Splunk Enterprise Security, we have native integrations with all the market-leading SOAR and SIEM platforms. If you are using a platform that's not listed here, please let us know. We have a very large integration team whose only focus is building integration on behalf of our customers with the platforms that they leverage. Okay. So to kind of sum everything up, time and accuracy are obviously critical when investigating security events. The exponential growth that we have seen in the number of phishing threats makes automation the best choice to respond quickly to protect your organization. And as I said at the beginning of the call, automation is only as good as the intelligence feeding your playbooks. Our threat detection engine, Seer, again, looks at phishing websites as a threat researcher would by using virtual browsers with machine learning. And this allows us to detect zero-hour phishing websites hours before the competition with almost zero false positives. The high efficacy and the high accuracy of our solution is what allows our customers to achieve full automation. Now, if you would like to have a one-on-one session to learn more about our solution, to have a conversation around how we can help your organization achieve full automation, please don't hesitate to reach out. If you are interested in doing a trial, it's really simple. All you need to do is fill out our free trial request form, and we'll send you an activation key. The SlashNext apps can be downloaded directly from your Soar and SIM platforms. And with that key, you can get yourself up and running in no more than 5 minutes. Okay. All right. If you have any immediate questions, please send them over to me now over the Q&A section. Thank you. Okay. So the first question is around detection rate. How do we calculate detection rate? So as I mentioned before, our detection rate is 99.95%. So our threat researchers are the people that are reviewing our data to make sure no threats go missed or unnoticed. And they do so by performing manual analysis, as well as running sophisticated algorithms, allowing them to sift through the vast amount of data, right? And I'll go on and say that the analysis is then fed back into our Seer threat detection engine to improve detection. And our goal is to increase the detection rate from the current 99.95%, which is very high, to 99.99%. Okay. The second question is around evasive techniques. How do you get around content blocking based on IP? Or how do we get around websites that blocks content inspection? And it's very simple. We simply hide our IPs using dynamic residential IPs, right? So the phishing website doesn't know if the scan request is coming from a security vendor or from an employee that's working remotely, right? Now, it's worth mentioning that we also have an endpoint solution that prevents phishing attacks across email, web, and mobile devices. Recently, we were involved in a bake-off against isolation technology from a secure email gateway vendor. And the customer shared with us that when they attempted to access the phishing website through isolation, they were getting a page cannot be displayed. When the user opted out of isolation, the phishing website was served. Why? Because in the former instance, the request was coming from an IP address owned by the security email gateway vendor. Now, fortunately, our customer has our endpoint protection service. So when the user opted out of isolation, our solution kicked in and blocked the page. Okay. I think that's all the time that we have now for the questions. For the ones that I have not answered, we will make sure that we follow up with you directly. Thank you very much for your time today.